My husband kicked me out of the house for the woman he was cheating on me with. He forgot one small detail. This house and the company were mine. Watch how I put him on the street in 48 hours. In the silence of the vast living room, the sound of something being thrown echoed like a gunshot. A large manila envelope landed roughly on the Italian marble coffee table. It slid a few inches, clinking against the crystal vase holding the white lilies I had just arranged that morning. "Sign it. Now." Kanan stood there. His breathing was heavy, his face flushed, not with shame, but with the fury he felt entitled to unleash. The sleeves of the custom Tom Ford suit I had bought him for his birthday last month were slightly wrinkled, a sign that he had already vented his emotions somewhere else before coming home. Slowly, I set down my cup of hibiscus tea. The delicate chime of the china against the saucer contrasted sharply with my husband's violent attitude. I looked at him, then at the envelope. "Divorce papers?" My voice was flat. "Not just divorce papers, Vespera. It's your ticket out of this hell of a marriage," Kanan snapped. He loosened his tie roughly. "I'm done. Done with your coldness, done with the way you keep this house like a museum, and most importantly, I've found someone who actually respects me as a man." I wasn't surprised. Of course there was another woman. The cheap vanilla perfume that had been clinging to his suits when he walked through the front door for the past 2 months had already alerted me. "Her name is Sierra," Kanan continued, as if he had read my mind or wanted to hurt me deeper. "And she needs security. So this is the security. I want you out of this house." He leaned forward, planting both hands on the marble table, glaring at me with a menacing look that seemed ripped from a bad gangster movie. "I'm giving you 48 hours, Vespera. 48 hours to pack your personal things, clothes, makeup, whatever. But the furniture, the art, and this estate are mine. My new fiancée, Sierra, deserves this house. She wants to redecorate next week." I looked around the living room. The 20-foot ceilings, the baccarat crystal chandelier, the marble floors imported specially from Italy. Kainan thought this house was his because, for the last 5 years of our marriage, I had let him believe he was the king of this castle. I let his ego grow, watering it with compliments and white lies that his CEO salary was enough to maintain our lifestyle. The truth was, Kanan's salary barely covered the property taxes. "Kanan," my voice was soft but cold, "do you really want to do this like this? Kick me out in 48 hours? "Absolutely," he replied with arrogance. "Don't even think about a division of assets. The company is doing well thanks to my blood and sweat. And I've paid for this house every month from our joint account. You're just a housewife who got lucky marrying a successful black man. So sign, pack your bags, and get out. If not, I'll call the security guards at the gate to drag you out in 2 days." I stared at him. There was a cruel satisfaction in his eyes. He was enjoying this moment. He felt he had the power, that he had won. Slowly, the corners of my lips curled upward. It wasn't a smile of fear or sadness. It was the slight smile of a chess player watching their opponent move the queen to the wrong square, opening the path to checkmate. "All right," I replied calmly. "I accept the envelope." 48 hours. That's more than enough time. Kanan huffed, thinking I had surrendered. He didn't know that in the next 48 hours, I wouldn't just be leaving this house. I would ensure that the moment he stepped out that door, he wouldn't have a single roof over his head under the Atlanta sky. "Fine. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Sierra is coming over soon to see her new home." Kanan turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the divorce papers. I glanced at the antique grandfather clock in the corner. 47 hours and 50 minutes left. The game had begun. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Kanan was showering. I could hear the water running upstairs. With calm steps, I opened the heavy custom wood door. On the threshold stood a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was pretty, honestly. Long hair perfectly laid, a tight red dress, a little too low cut for a daytime visit. She looked me up and down, her eyes scanning my appearance. I was dressed in a simple silk loungewear set with no flashy jewelry. Are you the help? Oh, wait, you must be Vespera. Her voice was high-pitched and full of disdain. And you must be Sierra, I replied, opening the door a bit wider. Come in. Sierra walked in without asking for permission, her heels making a sharp clacking sound on the marble. She immediately looked around, her eyes gleaming with greed as she took in the opulence of our foyer. Wow, she murmured, but then scoffed. A little dated, too much beige and gold. It looks tacky. When I move in, I'm changing everything to a more modern, industrial, minimalist style. She pointed to a large abstract painting on the wall. It was a Kehinde Wiley original, worth as much as 2 of Kainen's luxury cars. That is really ugly. We'll have to get rid of that. I closed the door gently, suppressing my emotions. Would you like something to drink, Miss Sierra? Iced coffee, no sugar, she ordered without even looking at me, as if I were a barista at a coffee shop. She walked toward the living room, touching our Italian leather sofa with hands full of costume jewelry rings. I went to the kitchen. There, Miss Etta, our loyal housekeeper who had worked for my family since I was a child, looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She must have heard the altercation earlier. Baby, she whispered with a trembling voice, Mr. Kainen, he's crossing a line. Shh. I put a finger to my lips. Don't cry, Miss Etta. Make an iced coffee for our guest and activate all the security cameras in the house to high-definition audio recording mode. Right now? Ms. Etta's eyes widened for a moment. Then, wiping her tears, she nodded with determination. She knew that when I gave specific instructions, I was plotting something. I returned to the living room with a tray holding the iced coffee and some snacks. Just then, Kainen came down the stairs. His hair was damp, and he was wearing a comfortable polo shirt. His face lit up when he saw Sierra. "Babe!" Kainen exclaimed, opening his arms. Sierra ran to him and threw herself into his arms, right in front of me. "Kainen, the house is huge, but the taste is so old-fashioned. We'll have to renovate everything." "Whatever you want, my love," Kainen said, kissing her on the forehead. He shot me a glance. His look was cold. "Vespera, don't just stand there. Leave the drinks and go up to your room. We need to be alone." I placed the tray carefully on the table. Sierra grabbed her glass, took a sip, and frowned. "A little bitter, but whatever." She sat on my husband's lap on a single armchair, speaking in a baby voice. "When will the papers be ready? I want to throw a housewarming party soon. My girls are going to die of jealousy." "She'll be gone the day after tomorrow," Kainen replied indifferently, his hand circling Sierra's waist. 48 hours. After that, this house is officially our palace. The deed isn't in my name yet, but that's a simple formality. My lawyer says since it's the house we lived in together, I have full rights to it. I was standing near the threshold, leading to the dining room, half hidden, but close enough to hear everything. My phone in my dress pocket had been recording the whole time. "But that woman won't ask for anything, right?" Sierra asked worriedly. "And the Mercedes she drives will be ours too?" "Don't worry," Kainen laughed with contempt. "Vespera is ignorant when it comes to legal or financial matters. She's never worked a day in her life. She's just lived comfortably off my salary. She doesn't have the money to hire a good lawyer. At most, she'll go back to her parents' house in some backwater town in Mississippi." I had to suppress a laugh. My parents in Mississippi? My father was a diplomat in Switzerland for years, and my mother was one of the biggest art collectors in the Southeast. Kainen had never met them. My excuse was that they were too busy to hide the fact that they never approved of my marriage to a man they called a social climber. "Great," Sierra giggled. "I can't wait to be Mrs. Jenkins." They kissed. It was a disgusting scene, but very useful. I stopped the recording in my pocket and headed to my hidden study behind the library. They thought they had won. They had no idea that every word they had just spoken was another nail in their own financial coffin. 45 hours left. The clock struck the early hours of the morning. The house was silent. Kainen and Sierra were asleep. Ironically, Sierra had insisted on sleeping in the master bedroom, implicitly kicking me out. Kynan, on the other hand, whether out of a shred of shame or fear of breaking the rules too fast, had settled into the guest room. I was in my study, the only space to which only I had the key. This room was perfectly soundproofed. I turned on a dim desk lamp and opened a safe hidden behind a shelf of old encyclopedias. Inside wasn't cash, but a stack of documents bearing the logo of a multinational corporation, St. Clair Holdings. My mother's maiden name was St. Clair, and that name controlled 40% of the commercial real estate in Atlanta. I pulled out a special phone I only used for business matters, a phone Kynan never knew existed. I dialed speed dial number 1. "Yes, Madam Director." The voice on the other end was clear and alert, despite it being midnight. It was Attorney Hightower, head of the legal department at St. Clair Holdings, and my personal lawyer. "Attorney Hightower, I'm sorry to bother you at this hour." My voice had become sharp and authoritative, very different from the submissive wife voice Kynan was used to hearing. "It's no bother, Madam Director. Is it urgent?" "Activate the Black Swan Protocol on Kynan Jenkins's assets," I ordered. There was a brief silence on the other end. "Are you sure, Madam Director? That protocol will strip him of everything, including his position as CEO at Nexus Innovations." "I am sure," I replied coldly. "He has violated clauses 14 and 15 of our marital agreement, adultery and attempted unilateral forced appropriation of assets. I have video and audio evidence from today's security footage." I heard rapid typing on the other end. "Accessing data. Yes, according to the secret investment agreement Mr. Jenkins signed 5 years ago, thinking it was a mere formality with an angel investor, ownership of his shares in Nexus was subject to vesting conditions linked to performance and moral integrity. With the evidence you have, we can activate the unilateral share buyout clause at zero nominal value for gross breach of contract. Do it. Block access to his corporate accounts tomorrow morning. And Attorney Hightower." "Yes, Madam Director." "Verify the status of the deed to this house. Make sure the lock preventing any notary from proceeding with a title change without my fingerprint is already active." "That was processed automatically, Madam Director. The deed to the Buckhead estate is in the name of Vespera St. Clair. It is a separately inherited asset. Your husband has no right to a single cent. Even if he made renovations to the house, they are considered a voluntary donation." I smiled with satisfaction. "Good. One more thing. Contact our bank manager and freeze our joint account. The funds transferred from my personal account must be returned to my trust. Leave only Mr. Jenkins' salary for this month in that account." "Understood. It will execute at 8 a.m. when the banks open. Do you need anything else?" "Prepare an eviction team for 40 hours from now. I want off-duty deputies and a bailiff to accompany them. I don't want any physical drama that could pose a risk to me." "Understood, Madam Director. Get some rest." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking at a photo from our wedding that was still on the desk. Once, I hid my identity because I wanted to be loved for who I was. I wanted Kynan to build his confidence, to feel like a successful head of the household. I injected funds into his company through a shell corporation. I got him huge projects through my uncle's contacts, all without him knowing. I let him think he was a genius. But genius without humility breeds a monster. And now that monster was trying to devour its creator. I stood up. I had one more thing to do tonight. An asset inventory. 40 hours left. The massive house was full of valuable items, but Kynan was too foolish to know what held real value. He believed the value of an object came from the size of its logo. He was proud of his 85-inch TV and his leather sofa, but he was blind to the value of art. I moved like a ghost through my own house. I brought a special hardshell suitcase up from the basement. My first target was the wall in the central hallway. 3 paintings hung there. To Kynan, they were just strange, abstract paintings I had bought at a gallery in Midtown. To a collector, they were original early sketches by Kehinde Wiley. I took them down carefully and replaced them with high-quality replicas I had prepared beforehand in a secret storage unit. I had commissioned them 6 months ago when I first started suspecting Kynan's infidelity. The difference between the original and the forgery was almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. Kanan would never notice the difference. Next, the jewelry. I entered the walk-in closet attached to the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Sierra's snores coming from the bedroom. With silent steps, I opened the wall safe behind the mirror. Kanan knew the combination to this safe. Inside was a diamond set, a Rolex, and some gold bars. But what Kanan didn't know was that this safe had a false bottom. I lifted the velvet lining at the bottom of the box. Underneath were the real documents, the deed to the house, the paperwork for Kanan's sports car, which was actually bought in my company's name, passports, and government bonds. I took everything out. Then I pulled a little prank. I took Kanan's Patek Philippe watch, a gift for his birthday last year that cost $100,000. I packed it in my suitcase and replaced it with a high-quality replica I had bought online on a whim. The appearance was identical, the weight too, but the inner mechanism would barely last a week. Finally, I went to the garage. The cars were parked neatly, Kanan's yellow Porsche and my modest luxury SUV. I popped the hood of the Porsche, and using a technique my father, a car enthusiast, had taught me, I pulled a small fuse. The fuel pump fuse. Tomorrow morning, that car wouldn't start. I wanted to see his face when his symbol of pride refused to cooperate. After packing all the valuables safely into the hard-shell suitcase, I took it to the back door. There, my loyal personal driver, Mr. Godfrey, was waiting with an unmarked black van. "Take this to the apartment in Midtown, Mr. Godfrey. The key is in the lockbox, as always," I whispered. "Understood, Miss Vespera. Will you be all right here?" Mr. Godfrey asked, concerned. "I'll be perfectly fine, Mr. Godfrey. Tomorrow the real show begins." The van drove away in silence. I went back inside a house that now looked a little emptier to my eyes, but to Kanan would still seem luxurious. The life of this house, its liquid assets and valuable art, was already gone. What remained was just an empty shell that would soon collapse and crush Kanan. I went back to my study and lay down on the sofa. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow, I had to act again. 36 hours left. The morning light filtered through the study curtains. I woke up feeling fresh. Strangely, there were no tears or confusion, just a sharp focus. I showered and dressed with care. I wore an elegant but understated navy blue knee-length dress. I went down to the dining room, where Ms. Etta had already prepared breakfast, shrimp and grits with fluffy biscuits, Kanan's favorite. Kanan and Sierra came down 10 minutes later. They looked like a couple who had just won the lottery. Sierra was wearing my silk kimono. She must have taken it from the master closet. The audacity. But I let her. The higher they fly, the harder the fall. "Good morning, ex-wife." Kanan greeted me with a mocking tone. He sat at the head of the table. "Did you sign the papers?" I placed a bowl of grits in front of him. "They're on the living room table." Kanan immediately forgot about breakfast. He dragged Sierra to the living room. I followed calmly. Kanan grabbed the envelope, pulled out the papers, and flipped to the last page. His eyes widened, seeing my signature neatly stamped on the dotted line. "Finally!" he exclaimed, lifting the paper in the air like a trophy. "Look, babe, she surrendered. This house is ours." Sierra squealed with joy and hugged Kanan tightly. "Oh, Kanan, you're amazing! Bye-bye, Vespera." Kanan looked at me. A triumphant smile adorned his face. "Well done, Vespera. You know your place. Since you cooperated, I'll be nice. You can use a company truck tomorrow to move your things. But remember, not a single appliance or piece of furniture. Those are my assets." "Thank you for your generosity, Kanan," I replied dryly. "I'll start packing today." "Oh, and one more thing," Kanan said, pointing to Sierra. "Sierra wants to use your dressing room now, so clear out your vanity in an hour. She needs space to do her makeup." "Of course," I replied. "Make yourselves at home." Kanan, with his morale in the clouds, went back to the dining room to devour his breakfast. Sierra ran up the stairs, excited by the idea of conquering her new territory. I stood silently in the living room watching Kanan's back. He hadn't read the fine print. He hadn't read Section 2 on page 4 regarding the division of assets. Nor did he notice that under my signature, I had dated the document for yesterday.